Hi, this is my Chapter 13 discussion. Discuss the key components of the propositions regarding employee abusive organizations. What are they, why are they important, and how do they help us better understand abusive issues in organizations? How can you apply these to your own professional history? Use the text to explain your experiences after responding to the first part of the question. Workplaces where counterproductive workplace behaviors have become the norm are employee abusive organization, EAOs. Some key components to EAOs are abuse, antagonistic discourse, leadership either supporting or ignoring the problem, and they cause harm to various organizational stakeholders. These are important because they tell us what signs we should look for if someone is worried about an EAO. Each key component has negative aspects that have become normalized. I don't think I can really apply EAOs to my professional history, though Proposition 1 states individual negative interactions in the workplace would not constitute an EAO because it is not coming from multiple message flows. Most of the places I have worked have had either a handful of employees or the employees were in other departments and really didn't interact with mine. For more information on the 7 propositions, look at 389 and 390. Differentiate between the labyrinth and glass ceiling. What information is used to substantiate and differentiate between these concepts? Identify a case expositing outside the text and apply the course material to these concepts. The glass ceiling refers to an unbreachable barrier that prevents members of various outgroups from rising to upper levels of organizational leadership, 393. The glass ceiling suggests that it isn't possible for members of an outgroup to reach the upper echelon of management. Once they hit a certain level, they are only able to move laterally. With the labyrinth, it is possible to reach them, but it is extremely difficult. Alice Eagley and Linda Carley argue that this glass ceiling is more like a labyrinth. The labyrinth metaphor captures the various challenges confronting women as they travel often in indirect paths, sometimes through alien territory on their way to leadership, 393. Though they specify women in this quote, the same can be applied to members of any outgroup. Carla Hayden is the first woman to be voted in as the Librarian of Congress since the position was created in 1802. Of the 13 men that have previously held this position, only 2 of them actually had backgrounds in librarianship. She had to fight for what she believed in to get to her current position. What is the relationship between organizational justice and retaliatory behavior? Discuss them in detail and share a situation in your own professional experience where you've seen these concepts at work. Organizational justice is the way people react to situations within an organization, taking into consideration the options available to the individual, what the pros or rewards and costs are. How can the individual maximize their pros and reduce their cons? And well as how can they maximize their overall gains? Organizational justice also looks at how the organization treats its members. Are they all dealt with the same, or is there favoritism? Organizational retaliatory behavior is the negative responses employees have when they believe someone else within the organization is negatively impacting the organization and or its employees. I think organizational justice looks at what is actually happening, and retaliatory behavior looks at what an organizational member thinks is happening. The only thing I can think of for justice at the moment is similar to the example on 404 under distributive justice, which is comparing one person's cost and reward against another. It was something about two equivalent positions with different hourly pay rates. I believe the difference turned out to be because of how long each of the people had been working in that position. For retaliatory, there was a group from a different building, and they would all get together outside of work for dinners, drinks, and paintings, but one person was never asked to go, and though everyone else was invited. In this case, the manager perceived that she was being purposely excluded, which actually I believe is true. And in response, they either had to invite everyone or they couldn't set up plans while at work, even on breaks. Identify what you believe to be the most important topic in Chapter 13, not already addressed in one of the above questions. Explain it as discussed in the text and give a personal or professional example that brings it to life. I think this section on defining workplace bullying is very important. Like many other terms in this text, there isn't one specific definition for workplace bullying. In 2005, 5 specific characteristics were found when looking at the various definitions. They are the experience of negative behavior, behaviors experienced persistently, targets experiencing damage, targets labeling themselves as bullied, targets with less power and difficulty defending themselves, and the more in-depth explanation can be found on 382 and 383. My example goes back to when I was in elementary school. I used to have a really bad speech problem, so much so that I went to speech therapy for years. The negative behavior was constantly being bullied about how I talked. The behavior was experienced persistently for several years. As for damage, that would be my dislike of talking and anxiety about talking during classes. I knew I was being bullied, and at that point I felt like I wasn't able to defend myself since my speech was the main reason for the bullying. So, thank you for listening.